What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything right here on Sifted Games at SIFTD.net. I'm Shane Satterfield, and I'm here to answer your questions about video games, sports, music, entertainment, whatever you can come up with. I'm here to answer it. I'll say this, though. We need questions right now. I really had to scrape to get this episode together. In fact, one of the questions is from like a couple weeks ago. So please head on over to SIFTD.net. Right there in the header, there's a link that you can click. That'll take you to our forums where you can ask me questions about literally anything. Before we get going, I just want to say thank you to everybody who is pledging anything at patreon.com/sifted. Thank you so much for supporting us financially. You're why this stuff keeps happening, and this show in particular keeps happening because some of you guys and girls are spending $7 or more per month at that Ask Shane tier. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Ultimately, we have some pretty good questions. I think this is going to be a good episode. Let's see how it all unfolds. Okay, first up this week is a question from Erebus Jones. A recent rumor hinted that PlayStation 6 is going to come in cheaper than expected. At first, this seemed implausible, but now I think the drama around the PC version of Borderlands 4 hints at how Sony might do it. It's become clear that Gearbox built the PC version of Borderlands 4 around the idea that frame generation would be used. Is this how Sony and Microsoft are going to keep costs down, using frame generation to make up for a lacking core power and ballooning costs? Do you think gamers will accept this? Okay, so it's hard for me to know what everybody knows, and so I'm going to briefly explain what he's talking about, Erebus Jones is talking about with frame generation. There's this thing that NVIDIA, I think, invented called dlss, and basically it uses, now they say it uses AI. Before it was AI, it was just computing power. But anyway, they use computing power / AI to basically create frames in between frames. So let's say you have a game that's running at 30 frames per second and the hardware isn't powerful enough to run it at 60 frames per second. What DLS does and frame generation does is it uses computers to create the extra frames in between the existing frames. So you can then have that game that would only run at 60 frames per second running at 120 frames per second on the same hardware. So what Erebus Jones is getting at here is basically, and I think that's the way some people look at it, is that both PlayStation and Xbox are going to cheat with their next consoles, and they're not going to be all that more powerful than what we have now, but it will seem that way because of frame generation. You'll be able to play these games at higher frame rates when the hardware really has no business doing that. Now, again, a lot of people consider this cheating, but to be fair, it is the future. And it's not just NVIDIA. AMD has worked up its own frame generation. Sony has its own frame generation thing. Nintendo with Switch 2, I don't think it has its own frame generation. I think it's using some form of NVIDIA's DLSS. But the bottom line is the consoles that we have right now are using frame generation. So yes, of course, the consoles that are to come are going to use frame generation. It doesn't come free. DLSS and other frame generation operations. There's a cost to it. The games do not look as good as they would if they were running at that frame rate on core hardware power, as Erebus puts it. There are anomalies that you can see, and a lot of people can't see it. But if you're someone who's played a lot of games, like Matt and I have been playing games for 40 years or whatever, you can see it. There are these little, like almost like streaks or anomalies in the visuals, and you really see it when you turn quickly, when it has to kind of account for that very quick and drastic shift in information. That's when you tend to see the anomalies. But the bottom line is that, yeah, a lot of times, if you have a trained eye, you can see that a game is using frame generation, but a lot of people will never see it. And so, the hardware manufacturers have figured this out, that we can get 120 frames out of these games. Most people won't complain. They'll be happy that they're playing at the higher frame rate, and off we go. So I think you're right, Erebus. I think in the PlayStation's case, yes, I think it's definitely going to use frame generation. Now, here's the thing. Both are going to use it. But Xbox just this week, just yesterday, Sarah Bond did an interview with Mashable where she basically said, yeah, the next Xbox is going to be a hyper-powerful PC. And, that's why the rumors are swirling around that the next Xbox, because the die size that they're going to use is going to be like over $1,000. So I think Xbox actually, I wouldn't say it's ditching frame generation, but it's saying like, look, we're not going to rely on frame generation to get high frame rates out of our games. We're going to have the hardware there to make it happen organically. And then what do we get when we use frame generation on top of that hardware? That's where you're getting into high-end PC gaming. So I think each platform holder has a different approach to how they're using frame generation, but I think they're all going to have to use it if they want to compete. And in the Switch 2's case, it's definitely a necessity in order to compete. And that's the only way modern, big budget, third-party games are ever going to appear on Switch 2 is because it uses some form of frame generation. So for some platforms, it's a godsend. It sounds like for the next Xbox, it's going to be unneeded. But I think if PlayStation and Sony want the PlayStation 6 to come in around $700 or $800, it's going to have to use hardware tricks like that to get the games looking the way that I think most consumers expect at that point. So it's not a simple question. It's a great question on your part, Erebus Jones. And I think, you know, DLSS has been around for a long time. This isn't some new technology, but it has taken the console manufacturers and the console people a lot longer than probably they should have to get on board with it. So I think to the trained eye, people like me, Matt, you, Erebus Jones, you can see DLSS, you can see the anomalies. I think most people can't, and so I think it is the way forward, for better or worse. All right, next up, we have a festive question from Commander Fett. What are some of your favorite things to do for Halloween? Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. You've said several times that you love watching horror movies. Are there particular movies you like to watch during this time? What recommendations do you have if someone is looking to watch something to help put them in the Halloween mood? Well, first of all, happy Halloween to everybody. Maybe a little bit early. It's actually next weekend, so maybe I'll be talking about it in next week's Ask Shane as well. But happy Halloween for those of you who celebrate. And I agree with you. Halloween may be my favorite holiday. I don't really celebrate Thanksgiving anymore. I need to stay here to work through the busy game release season, so I don't go home for Thanksgiving. My wife does. I spend Thanksgiving alone. You guys know that, though. You've seen videos of me being like, hey, I'm here by myself on Thanksgiving. So I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm not religious, so I like the holiday season just because I get to see family and friends that I haven't seen for a long time. I love giving gifts to people who I love, but I don't really celebrate Christmas for what it is. So Halloween has kind of become one of my favorite holidays, and I used to really, really celebrate it. I used to, if Halloween would fall during the week, sometimes I would take the next day off work because my wife and I, we used to go out for Halloween every single year. And LA really celebrates Halloween. Even if it's in the middle of the week, there's a huge party, house party, where they play house music and whatnot that's going to happen on Halloween. So my wife and I, we would go to these crazy warehouse parties where everybody was dressed up, totally illegal, by the way. And there'd be like 2,000 or 3,000 people in this warehouse with no permits. And some of the best DJs in the world would play there. My wife and I would get dressed up and we'd go and we'd have a blast. And, you know, as we've gotten older, we don't necessarily fit in with the age group that's going to that stuff anymore. I will say this, though, in LA, because the electronic music scene has been around for so long, there are tons of people our age who are still going out all the time. We don't go out as much as we used to, but we used to go out for every Halloween. So I hear you. I love Halloween. It is fun. It is exciting. Going out on Halloween night to clubs and bars and stuff like that is fun. Seeing how everybody dressed, all the really cool and creative costumes. I love Halloween. Now you're asking how to get into the Halloween spirit. And I could give you a list of 8 million movies that you should watch. If you want to get grossed out, I would say watch the Terrifier movies. If you want like a campy, old school horror film that is kind of gross still, watch like the original Evil Dead with like people who've never seen it. Like, I think stuff like that, or watch the Halloween movies, even though they're corny and cheesy, I think they do get you into the Halloween spirit, as bad as a lot of them are. So I could go on and on about movies to watch. I think any horror movie will put you in the Halloween mood. But I think more importantly, what I think really gets people in the Halloween spirit is going to a haunted house. Now, here in LA, they have the Universal, whatever, Halloween nights or whatever. I've never gone to one of those. I think the theme this year is Fallout, so I was tempted to go, but I'm not going to go. But what I'm recommending here is find your local haunted house where it's just a bunch of local people who rented some abandoned building for like a month, and they just turn it into their own haunted house. To me, those are the best things to get you in the Halloween spirit. Now, those things are hit or miss. You'll go in, and some of the rooms are going to be really corny and cheesy, but in almost every one of them, there is a handful of rooms in those things that you're just like, what is going on in here? This is crazy. You almost have this thing in the back of your mind that like some crazy person could be like working in this haunted house and use it as an opportunity to do bad stuff. Anyway, to me, those local haunted houses, those little like hay rides that you can go on locally where you get on a wagon and you ride through cornfields and people jump out of the cornfield, that stuff to me is what really establishes the Halloween spirit. So I'm like you. I celebrate Halloween. I love it a ton. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to a party next weekend for Halloween, but I don't think it's actually like on Halloween night. But we still celebrate. I love Halloween. I'm glad to hear that some of you guys too. And those were my recommendations on how to get into the Halloween spirit over the next week. All right. Our last question for this week's episode comes from Joaquin Dragoon. Tell us what you would like in the next generation of consoles and the ideal time frame for them to be released. Well, Joaquin, that is a simple question that's probably going to have a really long answer. I already talked about kind of what's going to be the hardware in the prior question, talking about frame generation and DLSS. Now, I think you're asking me for like ideally what I would like to see. So I guess ideally, I would like to see the sort of what the Xbox is doing on the PlayStation side, but somehow find a way to make the price reasonable. And I know that's a pipe dream, and I know that's unrealistic to have, you know, a console in well, I'll wait to give you the date, in the next handful of years that will run games coming out at that time at 120 frames per second or more on a console that costs $600 or $700 natively. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to have to use frame generation, but obviously I would prefer to have a console that has the power natively to run these games at high frame rates without having to use frame gen. Now, again, as I said earlier, most people won't notice that, so it's probably not a big deal to them. So let's talk about like what else I would like to see in the next consoles, and also feel free, by the way, to add what you want to see in the consoles down below in the comments, because I'm interested to hear what you guys want as far as consumers are concerned versus me as like a journalist. So I guess, you know, first I would like really powerful hardware at a reasonable price. And I think maybe what I really want is to be able to buy the next consoles for $500 or $600. But that is just not going to happen. Provided, again, there's so many X factors here. I don't want to get into Trump's tariffs again, but you can't help it because they affect everything. And so everything's an X factor as far as pricing is concerned, because he could just wake up tomorrow and just wipe out all the tariffs and suddenly our economy just goes into freaking hyperdrive and everything's affordable again. Like, it's all him. So he could wake up one day and change his mind and all of a sudden everything's just fine. So it's hard to predict stuff like this. It just is. So as far as pricing and stuff like that, maybe it's a fool's errand to even just discuss it. So let's just talk about the functionality. I definitely want disk drives in the next consoles. I still buy physical. So I have to buy some games for our coverage. They're expensive. They're $70, $80 after tax. That costs a lot of money. You know how much money we make. That's a big chunk of what we make every month. So I have to resell a lot of the games that I buy to cover to get that money back. And I get a lot of it back. Like, if you buy a game, you play it for a week, and then you sell it within a week of launch, you can get like $50 or $60 back on that game from eBay. And that's significant. So, you know, only spending a third of the money on games versus 2/3, that's important for me as a business, important to me as a person. So I really want disk drives in both of the next consoles, in all the consoles. I want disk drives in all of them. I know that's also probably a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. Talking about the Xbox, I want a better freaking controller. I realized that Microsoft was ahead of the curve with the Elite and the Elite 2, but since then it's been completely lapped, not just by PlayStation, but by third-party peripheral makers. To me, Xbox's controller, I like the layout and the sticks, but like, I hate the controller. Even in the Series 2, that clicky-clacky D-pad, it sucks. I hate when I have to play a game on Xbox that uses a D-pad. So fighting games, 2D games, I always try to play them on PlayStation because it has a D-pad that actually feels good. So for me, the Xbox controller, other than its layout, needs to be completely redone and reworked. Like, there should be haptic triggers, like the rumble in that thing sucks. So let's get good controllers for everything. Now, I'm not leaving Nintendo out of this either, because the new Pro controller for Switch 2 is nothing. Like, it has like one new feature that Nintendo built into the console so that you have to buy the new Pro controller. Basically being able to wake the system up remotely. Will only work on the new Pro Controller. Otherwise, it's the same damn thing. So Nintendo also, its controllers suck. It doesn't even have triggers that like travel. They had that on the GameCube. And they've reverted back to these on-off shoulder buttons. So anyway, PlayStation has the best controller now. I don't know if you figured that out or not, but that's the truth. So I'd like to see both Nintendo and Xbox. And obviously Nintendo's already put out Switch 2 stuff. It could update it. But more importantly, Xbox needs a complete controller rework. They need disk drives. As far as power is concerned, obviously I want as much powerful as possible. And then as far as like features are concerned, like I understand that people are repulsed by a lot of the concepts that were bandied about for Xbox One. The debut of it was like TV. But I liked a lot of the stuff that the Xbox One did. I liked that I could choose 2 windows on my TV with Xbox One, and I could put the game in one window and a football game in the big one, and I could switch them vice versa. That's a cool feature. And it just went away because people hated the Xbox One. So I think there's features like that I would like to see in consoles. I would like to have my console make it much easier for it to become a part of the network in my home so that it can become a true entertainment center. So I can stream all my music from my PC and all that kind of stuff on my console. Again, I get a lot of people who have Spotify and they're like, Shane, you're crazy. You're living in 5 years ago. I own all my music. I'm not a member of Spotify, and I'm guessing there's a Spotify app for PlayStation, but if there's not, I want that too. But, and then just other things like apps that don't appear like on every platform. For example, like I subscribe to ESPN Plus so I can watch hockey games. So I subscribe for a few months a year to that. But like, as of right now, PlayStation doesn't have the ESPN app where I can stream. I can only do that on Xbox or on my TV where the app is there. So stuff like that, app parity, I think would be great across all the platforms. As far as like form factor and size, I've gotten to the point where I don't care about that anymore. I don't know about you guys, but it's like, I think Xbox got to that point too, and it literally just made a rectangle. It's like, what are we doing here? I think GameCube was way ahead of the curve in that way, where it was like, you know what? Do we really care about this anymore? Let's just make a cube. And then Xbox is like, let's just make a rectangle. Like, I don't really care about the form factor or how it looks anymore, but I will say this, I want all the consoles to be black. White consoles, they get dirty, it's hard to clean them, it's hard to get the dirt out of the grooves of the plastic. It doesn't generally match most people's entertainment centers, so I want all the consoles to at least have black and then have other options if people want them. And now as far as when the new consoles come out, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really feeling that I need a new console right now. Now I'll say this, my PS5 with the recent games, it gets real hot. So hot that the cables in the back are almost like mushy. So I do feel like the current platforms have kind of reached their hilt, but like, that's okay. I think the games look great. I'm not ready to upgrade yet. I don't even have a PS5 Pro yet. And you know, I have a pretty decent gaming PC, which kind of gives you a glimpse into what's to come on consoles. And like, what I'm seeing there is not motivating me to say, hey, yeah, I'm ready to spend another $1,000 on a console or $800 on a console. Really, the answer to this for me is whenever the consoles can be priced at a reasonable price where the average person can afford to buy one. And that's not $800 or $1,000. That's like $600 max. So for me, the new console should go on sale when the tariffs go away and the companies can afford to sell them to people like us. Because at this point, it's kind of headed towards a place where it's like a rich person's hobby. And so to me, when the price is at a place where it can be reasonable, that's when they should launch. I guess that's probably where I'll stop for now, but maybe ask me this question again in another year, and I may have a completely different answer. Okay, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. Thanks to everybody who asked questions, but people, we need more. There are no questions right now waiting for Ask Shane Anything, so in 7 days, I'm doing this show again. So head on over there, click the link in the header at sifted.net, ask me a question about anything. I think the one thing I've noticed is that like, people have stopped asking me about stuff outside of games. You don't have to just ask me about games. I can answer questions about anything. I've been around the block, and I think I have pretty interesting insight into most things, but obviously that's for you to judge and not for me to say. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks to everybody who pledges anything at patreon.com/sifted. You guys are the engine that keeps this vehicle running. I appreciate you very, very much. Everybody have yourselves a great week, and don't forget, sleep is for the dead. Play games instead.